Let's get the views on this now with GB News business and economics editor Liam Halligan with On the Money. So let's put this into economic context then, Liam. He says that these pay rises are not inflationary because there is no borrowing to fund them.
Yeah, that's roughly what he's saying. I think that's a credible position as long as various government departments can make the savings to deliver these public sector pay rises. The government is clearly trying to draw a line under months and months and months of public sector strikes. I think it's very significant that he says at least he's got the various teaching unions on board. Junior doctors, other health unions have still to decide what they're going to do. And of course, we've got other sort of semi-public sector strikes at the Tube in London and national rail services. But I think in general, this is a good day for the government if indeed the trade unions respond to it in a positive way. Let's just have a little look at what's actually happened today. We can see here in a graphic that ministers have accepted, that says ministers considering, that we made that graphic just a few minutes ago. They have now accepted this 6 to 6.5% pay rise. You can see that actually that's lower than the rate of inflation, which is 8.7%. That's going to come in immediately, those public sector pay rises. It's in line with the official pay review bodies, as I've said. It's less than the rate of inflation, which is 8.7%. And I think in general, ministers are trying to really draw a line under the problems that they've been having. And just a little bit more detail here. The police are going to get 7%. Most of the NHS are going to get 5 to 6%. Though there are other additional payments, one-off payments. That's why the Prime Minister talked about 9%, because there'll be a one-off annual payment that will only last 1 year. Junior doctors are getting 6, prison officers 7, armed forces, always a little bit less, unfortunately. They're getting 5% and teachers 6.5%.
Yet to get response from the BMA, of course, who are on strike for 5 days at the moment.
They wanted 35%, of course.
Yes, there's a big gap.
Doctors.
However, a lot of the reporters there are already doing the rough maths because the Prime Minister indicated there's £1 billion coming from this idea of an increased levy for health surcharges for migrants coming into the country, and visa fees going up as well. But their estimate was that this will cost £3 billion. Therefore, where's the extra £2 billion coming from if you're not borrowing or actually taxing more?
These estimates, we're talking about single-digit billions in public spending of hundreds of billions every year. This stuff kind of comes out in the wash. I mean, it's interesting to me politically that Rishi Sunak wants to make a play of the fact that he's not borrowing, to your point, Pip, so no one can say this is inflationary. But also the extra money he's getting it on visa fees, on so-called NHS tourism, cracking down on that and making people pay for that, touching areas related to borders that he knows the public is really concerned about at the moment in the middle of the small boats crisis. So there's some clever, maybe a bit too clever politics going on there, saying that he's going to pay for this stuff without borrowing. I think that's credible and sound, but also by levying fees on visas and
he's
NHS.
He's also saying that it's reasonable because it's broadly in line with private sector increases.
It is broadly in line with private sector increases. 7.3% was the private sector pay rise that we learnt of yesterday between March and May, compared to March to May 2022. We should say also that about a fifth of us work in the public sector, and these pay review bodies cover about half the public sector. We're talking about a half of a fifth, or about 1 in 10 of the population are impacted by these numbers. The vast majority of civil servants, both in Whitehall and across the rest of the UK, this doesn't cover them. They'll have separate agreements.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the language, because, again, he was pressed by the reporters, savings or cuts. He wanted to talk about reprioritising and indicating that they've already been talking to government departments to identify where maybe there's been an underspend in some parts, and that money can be actually shifted to a different department.
That's right. There will be some pain here. I mean, particularly if the underspend is if the Department for Health is told to reprioritise, where, of course, a lot of these wage bills will fall. Expect leaks from Sir Humphrey and others to journalists like me saying, oh, we're cutting this frontline service, we're cutting that frontline service. So I think the Prime Minister and his team have made a major step towards better industrial relations today, but a lot of it will be in the union's acceptance beyond the teachers and also in the implementation. So there's lots of landmines he can step on.
And let's not forget, it was only a few days ago that the TUC was being pretty vocal, saying that they were expecting the government to ignore this public sector issue in terms of the independent pay review bodies and warning how dangerous that would be.
It is interesting, the TUC, the Trade Union Congress, we've seen, for instance, the head of some of the biggest unions, the GMB, Gary Brown, very important trade union leader, laying into the government because it wants to, laying into the Labour Party because it wants to, not drill any oil and gas in the North Sea. On the other hand, in the end, the TUC does back Labour. It obviously funds Labour, and it isn't going to make this implementation by a Tory government of a tricky pay review body decision easy. Of course it's not going to, particularly when the Labour Party is seen to be on the cusp of power. So, as I say, a major step forward by government. Hopefully there'll be fewer strikes as a result of this. But, a lot of the public will be pleased to have.
As I
but still a long way to go.
Yes, Rishi Sunak saying no amount of strikes will change our decision. There are no more talks on pay.
And I think, I have to say, sort of focus groups, opinion polls tend to support that view. A lot of the public are really cheesed off with these strikes. Members of the public who aren't in trade unions, who support the strikes, tend to be very vocal on social media and so on. But I think the polls show that a big silent majority of voters just want people to get on with it. If your average private sector wage increase is 7.3%, that means a lot of people, that's below inflation. That means at least half the people are getting less than that by definition if they're getting a pay rise at all.